Hi. First, I'd like to thank everybody who's participating in this panel. And as its organizer, I'd like to use part of my time to introduce it. This summer, both Bill McKibben of 350.org and Ezra Silk of the Climate Mobilization issued calls to the climate justice movement for something like a World War II equivalent climate mobilization in the United States. This is meant to help us get a grip on the emergency brake of the runaway climate crisis of a train that is taking us to a cliff or a train wreck or both. Choose your own metaphor. Any way one looks at it, people are going to die and be killed in this climate crisis. Now, climate science and some elementary sociological reasoning about carbon budgets, planetary boundaries, global inequality, the lack of political legitimacy of our two major parties, just pausing for a laugh there, and a culture of violence make clear that what we are face to face with, whether we know it or not, is an impending catastrophe. And this should not be sugar-coated, which I think neither Bill nor Ezra are guilty of. In fact, to lay my cards on the table, I'm in full agreement with the spirit of what both of them and their organizations, both of which I belong to, are doing for climate justice, which is the passion of my life and my purpose for being alive on the planet at this point in history, as far as I can tell. So I won't be trying to score debating points here, so much as to help spark a conversation that will take who knows what form and lead us, hopefully, in some productive directions moving forward. In true social movement scholarship and social movement building mode, I'd like to engage with the terms of this discussion, because our words, our memes, our stories, and beyond them, the political cultures of opposition and creation that we're building in the climate justice movement will be crucial to our success or failure. So let's look for a moment at the terms. Some critics and activists, including Ezra, have criticized the war metaphor in the World War II mobilization. I don't like to hold up war, obviously, or violence as useful in any way, either. But to be sure, it's not World War II that's being held up as praiseworthy. It's the collective effort to win that war, an alliance between government and people, to mobilize as a society to defeat an evil foe. I think that's the heart of the metaphor. With that, I don't disagree at all. It would be nice to have a meme without war in it, agreed. The word warrior, interestingly, has sort of strangely better overtones, though, at least in my book. Climate warrior is an honorable term, whereas I dislike quite a bit the term climate hawk, because in the context of US politics, a hawk wants to go to war. A warrior, on the other hand, strives for something, in the same way the true meaning of jihad is about striving, as much on a personal level as in its now widely accepted meaning of crusade-like war. Similarly, the word hero grates on some horizontalist and feminist ears, but not so much for me, because I do think that we're involved here in something akin to what Joseph Campbell meant by hero's journey, but in a collective sense. And I think we will need to aspire to be up to the tasks that will confront us as warriors, as heroes, as many heroes. The upshot, I guess, is let's keep working on the meme so that we'll have a mobilization without a war. And again, still, the actual World War II mobilization parallel is not off the mark. And Bill McKibben and others have done quite a lot with it that works very well. This will be controversial with some of my anarchist or agrarianista friends, but I do think we're going to need some massive government, economic, and political intervention of a good kind, of course, somehow, for once. And in this, I'm an eco-socialist, though not really statist enough for some of my comrades in that camp. By instinct, I am an anarchist in situations marked by vastly unequal power, and we should worry about what massive state intervention will do to democracy, to human rights. Okay, so what about the word victory as a term? Well, that has many positive connotations, especially in a society that is as sports crazed as the United States. No one wants to be a loser, as Donald Trump has put it to the nation with a kind of sneering cynicism and unprecedented boorishness. The irony, of course, and it's delicious, is that before this conference ends, he will have lost the biggest contest of his life. Of course, that doesn't make Hillary a winner either, so go figure. I guess with respect to politics in the US these days, we're in kind of a lose-lose situation. So I like the upbeatness of a victory plan. But to disagree with Ezra a little bit in his discussion on this point, I do side with Bill in saying that there are friends and enemies in this struggle. In 2012, Bill's article in Rolling Stone shook a lot of us into action with the terrifying new math of global warming and the carbon budget way of framing the climate crisis. Less remembered, perhaps, was his subtitle, and which makes clear who the real enemy is. In 2012, for Bill, it was the fossil fuel industry, and it still is today, I have no doubt. So that's why I'm not sure that it's so accurate to call climate change our enemy, as Bill does in his recent piece. I'd like to name our enemies so we can confront them. Take Naomi Klein's brilliant subtitle as a profound meme example of this. It's now capitalism versus the climate, and both versus us. I don't think that we'll get radical enough fast enough unless we immediately start acting like we recognize that the enemy is the global 1% of the big corporations, not just the fossil fuel majors, evil as they are, and includes the banks with their immoral and useless system for creating profit, as well as the politicians and parties who sell themselves shamelessly to the highest corporate bidder. Talk about transparency. This system is out in the open, and we have the innocence to call it democracy. There is going to be conflict, sharp conflict, and there will be blood because the 1% is a vicious band of thugs, smug in their callous self-righteousness and dangerous when threatened or even asked to share anything. I have no sympathy for them and expect no quarter from them when the day finally comes that we get strong enough to scare them. So this is going to expose people to all the dangers to life and limb that a real war has, or a massive repressive government imposes. The next 2 decades will be dangerous in that they will bring the climate justice movement into a war with the major transnational corporations and governments, facing the police, their armies, torturers, courts, and humans' propensity for cruelty. Maybe that's the wartime metaphor we should be using. The other thing about a victory, and in the context of World War II, of course, as has been noted, is that the current climate wars aren't going to be won in 5 years, if ever. So we're talking about a permanent mobilization. Ezra, I think, might be dreaming a bit when he talks about someday getting to a 0-degree world, but I'd be happy to be wrong about that. Perhaps when 40 or 50,000 years have passed, and through some inexplicable miracle, we do have the Holocene conditions back, and if there are still people on the planet. Sorry, Ezra, I don't mean to sound harsh. I was just struck rather forcefully by this part of your talk, and it did make me think about that. So I don't think we should promise victory even if we use the word. Ours will be a victory because it will be the least worst outcome that we can bring about. And that's if all goes well. And it won't. And I'm as optimistic a soul as you will ever meet. So I guess I'm saying, let's hold out hope, a precious word, but not for an unrealizable victory. Let's be realistic about the problem and the solutions, which I hate to tell both Bill and Ezra and Paul Gilding, whose talk you should listen to on this point. But that's not anything that capitalism can deliver. So we have to get past capitalism, and pretty fast. I think Bill and Ezra have it in them to be realistic, as Naomi Klein is, that we're talking about building a post-capitalist world. And by 2050, even if we don't know yet what to call the next system. Another reason why Naomi nailed it by saying this changes everything is because fighting for climate justice can do just that, and much for the better. The final term I'd like to consider is mobilization. I'm down with that one. We need the biggest, broadest, most inspirational, joyful, and loving social movement that the world has ever imagined. And that means a mobilization of spectacular proportions. We all know that our struggle won't end in 5 years. It will still be going on in 5 generations. And that's only if 2 crucial generations rise to the occasion. The generation of all people alive on the planet right now, and the younger generations of the millennials and their children between now and 2050. Because by 2050, we'll pretty much know, one way or the other, how it's going to turn out. So much depends, sorry about this, on how the current generation of young people respond. And I'm proud to be standing with you. It keeps me young. And so too, how the ones coming after them respond, who will be socialized by them into living better, but living with less, being happy rather than having things. We're not in 1940 anymore, when rationing came on the heels of the Great Depression. Today and tomorrow, it's going to be about degrowth, coming to permanently replace a consumer-driven capitalism that is, deep in our bones, our minds, our souls. It's a tough sell, but it's the best bargain in town. Unless we drastically reduce our energy consumption and our numbers here in the global north, we won't get out of this, nor will we deserve to. We need degrowth, buen vivir, climate justice, environmental justice, social justice, healthcare for all, adequate shelter, nutritious food, meaningful occupations, education for our children, enough to live on, cultural diversity and creativity, and we need to be on good terms with all our neighbors. Oh, and also to have a say in the affairs of the land, and have clean energy, clean water, and breathable air. And we're not going to get all those things with massive amounts of clean energy, I should say. We're going to have to learn to live with less energy, less resources, less waste, less stuff. Like I said, it's a tough sell. We better put some of our best people on it. I'm calling the last section of this talk Wartime Mobilization, or Mobilization for Radical Social Change and Climate Justice. There's no question in my mind that we have to go up against the fossil fuel industry and all its allied machinery. So now, in 2016, in the United States of America, what political party will do this? Let's not bother speaking of the Republicans. They are the enemy. The only honest answer, though, is that the Democrats are not going to do what the moment so urgently requires either. And what economic system will allow this? In your hearts, you know that capitalism won't. Will we succeed? I'm hoping, and more than hoping, I'm throwing myself into it. But will we win? Let me close with the immortal words of the Velvet Underground, so far ahead of their time. As Lou Reed once sang, so I guess I just don't know. I just don't know. But I'm looking forward to finding out. And that's why we're having this conversation. Thank you.